President Obama said in a statement of March of this year, "When a typhoon hits the Philippines, or schoolgirls are kidnapped in Nigeria, or masked men occupy a building in Ukraine, it is America that the world looks to for help. America is an indispensable nation. That has been true for the last century, and it will be true for the next." When looking at President Obama's statement, it becomes very clear that our foreign policy has always been critical when it comes to international affairs. However, in the 21st century, uniquely, we have stopped looking toward whether foreign policy will benefit us solely as a nation, and instead have looked toward whether or not it will benefit the international community. And that is exactly why the United States has done more good than harm in pursuing its foreign policy objectives in the 21st century. It is because we have begun to look toward the international community before just looking toward our own domestic needs. We're going to look at exactly why this statement is true in three key facets of analysis. First, we're going to look toward military aggression, before secondly, looking toward economic assistance, and finally, and most uniquely, looking toward the aid and assistance we choose not to give. But first of all, let's look toward what's seen as a classic American move, is the military aggressor. We've always been known as the police of the world, and we've always been known as the nation that's always willing to step in with boots on the ground. But this time in the 21st century, we've seen a much different side of the militaristic America. Now, ever since Russia invaded Crimea and has been attacking Ukraine's borders, we've seen Ukraine struggle with their non-lethal aid that the United States and the United Nations has given them. But what we haven't yet seen from any other nation is lethal aid, until March 23rd, 2015, where the House of Representatives passed Bill 162, which called on the president to uniquely give to Ukraine a lethal defense systems to not only protect its sovereignty, but also to defend its territorial integrity. Now, according to Paul Son, Moscow correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, from February 5th, 2015, this is going to pave the way for a stalemate. Because what's unique about this foreign policy and what's unique about calling on the president for this favor is that we're not looking for America to best do Russia with its weapons. We are looking to protect Ukraine. And according to Barbara Starr, Pentagon correspondent from CNN from February 3rd, 2015, this is going to prevent the emboldenment of Russia. We are going to prevent Russia from thinking that the cost of military action further is low. We are going to prevent them from attacking other regions like the Baltic states. Ben Rhodes, Obama's deputy national security advisor, said in a statement earlier this year that what was critical about this move is that we're not injecting Ukraine with weapons with the goal of starting an all-out war, or continuing one, rather. But instead, what we're looking toward is actually forcing de-escalation on behalf of Russia, because Putin has continued to bypass every single chance for peace, and we need to give him a reason to beg for a treaty. And this is key for foreign policy for three reasons. We're going to decrease the strength of Russia to protect the countries surrounding it. But furthermore, we're going to protect the entire international community by showing that we're not just looking toward the areas that are affecting us on our domestic level. But finally, we're going to give the international community a model to follow, and we are going to continue to strengthen the United Nations. However, another aspect of foreign policy that has done more good than harm is the fact that we chose not to go in militarily in Africa. Now, according to the Council of Foreign Relations from January 2014, the Nigerian Boko Haram insurgency is the result of chronic poor governance, and any military force would be unsuccessful. Military aid would be illegal according to the Leahy law, which prevents any government from giving military assistance to another government or military that has committed human rights abuses. But according to foreign policy from 2014, military aid in itself would be unsuccessful because of the lack of ability for the Nigerian military to cooperate with the United States military. So therefore, economic assistance would be the most effective, to resume elections, to meet the needs of citizens and refugees, and finally to prevent the continued displacement of Nigerians. So therefore, the United States Agency for International Development set up three key programs. First, we set up the Psychosocial Support Team, a three-part program that consists of trauma counseling and costs about $3.5 million every year. But then we set up education. We set up a crisis program that costs $30 million for those who have been displaced but still want to pursue their education. But then we set up a $120 million program to strengthen education in Nigeria, before finally instituting the Nigerian Region Transition Initiative, which is going to increase democracy and it's going to allow chronic poor governance to end and the reign of Boko Haram to also end. This is going to decrease terrorism in the region. It's going to increase democracy, but most importantly, it's increasing the ability for every single Nigerian citizen to have access to the rights it deserves. According to the United Nations Charter, every single person in the world deserves access to education. They deserve access to a government that does not allow their rights to be trampled upon, and we are going to allow the Nigerian people to have those rights. But finally, and like I said, most uniquely, is the aid that we choose not to give. Now, in the Israel and Palestine issue, we realize that the Middle East needs a two-state solution or some kind of peace. However, according to Georgia Abed, former senior at the International Monetary Fund and the current governor of the Palestinian Monetary Authority, he said in 2005 that pouring aid into Palestine would be the worst mistake any country could make. So logically, in 2007, 85 countries poured in $7.4 billion. And according to the European Court of Auditors in 2013, $2.64 billion of that went missing. The fact of the matter is that the United States was one of the few nations to refuse to give any military assistance, to purely give $414 million a year for rebuilding their nation, which has allowed them to not divert any of that money toward terroristic measures. It didn't allow any of that money to slip toward Hamas, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And according to Middle East Quarterly from 2008, it was the aid that other countries gave that had a direct relation between increasing violence and the increased aid that they gave. In fact, the same report found that increased aid after September 2000 caused an increase in the Palestinian murder rate of both Israelis and Palestinians, and also found that in 1999, when there was no aid given, there was a stagnant amount of violence. The United States carefully made sure that our aid was being given toward our democratic ally of Israel. $3 billion toward their military to protect themselves, but no military aid toward the country that was accused of chronic kleptocracy. This is going to be what is going to allow the United States to guide these two nations toward a two-state solution, and is going to be what allows the Middle East to gain more peace, especially given these desperate times. So what the United States has realized is through its foreign policy in the 21st century that we have begun looking toward the international community as a priority. We began looking toward Ukraine and realizing that they needed to protect themselves and that we needed to give them the military ability to do so. But then we looked toward Africa and realized that Nigeria needed our economic assistance to guarantee human rights to its people, something that we could give to them regardless of whether or not it directly benefited the United States. But finally, we looked toward Israel and Palestine and realized that jumping on the bandwagon of the United Nations and other nations isn't always the best solution, because sometimes we can ourselves lead nations toward peace. And that's exactly our goal. Because America is an indispensable nation. That has been true through the 21st century. We have done more good than harm in pursuing our foreign policy, and that will continue to be true for the next few centuries.